It's story time again, chapter 42. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Yes, chapter 42. Three more stories coming from me to you on this, what I believe is a really nice day, or at least it's going to be by the end of it, going to be around 80 here as I sit on October 7th, 2025. And truthfully, I understand that it's probably not gonna be this warm again for, well, a while. That's the only way I can say it so that I don't kind of lose my mind about it. But hey, you live in the Northeast, you actually have 4 seasons, or at least you hope you get 4 seasons. I can tell you right here, right now, I'm excited about story number 42 because there's a story that's been meaning to be told a little bit, and it's kind of fun. Then another one that kind of popped up because I saw a feed on, of course, one of the social media sites. I think it was Facebook, probably on Instagram as well. But it prompted me to think of a story that related to that topic. So I'm going to tell that story. Finally, I believe I'm going to end with a story that's going to turn me into the Red Hulk a little bit. But that's okay, because it's all part of the business of automotive. And I think that personally, I get a little frustrated when I see people doing things that I'm 100% sure are not good as far as the automotive industry, especially since I was in it and I understand it at a pretty good level. And sometimes when you go to a place to have your vehicle worked on and you are a novice, let's say, when it comes to the automotive industry, they might be able to tell you to do certain things and you just sort of accept it. Kind of like when you go to the doctor, you're not going to necessarily tell the doctor, hey, can I delay that repair on that broken leg? I think I can make it. Probably not the best idea to just sort of go on your own in that regard. So you're going to sort of do the very same and sort of hope and trust that the people who are working on your vehicle actually know what they're talking about when it comes to the service writing people, and more so the people who are working on your vehicle. You hope they know what they're doing. And like I said, since I've been in the industry in both capacities, where not everybody is, don't get me wrong, not everybody is, and there are a few people who are like me who actually worked in the shop and then would go up to the front desk and actually talk to the customers. There are some who do it, and I believe that those are the people who are the best at doing it. And granted, there are others who simply go there and they're just simply salesmen. That's a problem. I'll get into it a little bit deeper when the main event comes about. But as for right now, it's time to fill in the blanks. Bacon. That's the first word I'm going to say in fill in the blanks. I actually did a video several months ago about strange bacon. And it turned out that this very strange bacon is probably the greatest food next to pizza I've ever eaten in my entire life. And this strange bacon I did a video on happens to cross two of my favorite things. First of all, bacon is one of my favorite things. And the other thing is cereal, particularly cereal boxes and certainly cereal itself. Wouldn't you know that bacon actually crossed with cereal? And that was Cinnamon Toast Crunch flavored bacon. I still have about maybe 5 or 6 pounds of it in my freezer, waiting for a rainy day because, well, it was a limited edition bacon. So If I ate it all, it'd be gone and I'd be sad. But now I have a little bit of time to use that bacon wisely. So, to get to the point here of this fill in the blank, what is the strangest bacon that I've ever seen? The blank is going to be filled in with, this time of year. Like I said, it's October 7th, 2025. And typically, everybody in this country knows that people lose their mind in late September, October, all the way through to usually Thanksgiving-ish time. And all they can think about is pumpkin spice. Yeah. I saw it because a friend of mine took a picture of it in a store. They actually created pumpkin spice bacon. I think that's going a little too far. I understand how the flavor would alter and be correct when it comes to the Cinnamon Toast Crunch bacon, because maple bacon is really good. It's got a nice sweet flavor to it, and you figure you add sugar to bacon. I mean, how much better can things get, right? And that's the whole idea with the Cinnamon Toast Crunch bacon. And it's got a little bit of that cinnamon hint to it, so it's really good. But pumpkin spice bacon, I don't know. That just, I don't know. I don't know. So to answer the question that is here presented to you for the fill in the blank is, what is the strangest bacon I've ever heard of? It's got to be that. Absolutely got to be that. Pumpkin spice bacon. Without question. Weirdest bacon ever. Ever. But now, I'm going to ring the bell, and it's going to be time for the main event. Story 42. Like I said, I'm going to start this thing out with a story that I discovered from some social media site. I don't know if it was Facebook or if it was Instagram. Could have been either one, because stuff like this pops up on all those things. And what I saw on social media was that in, I believe it's spring of 2026, PlayStation is going to shut down the sites and not going to support PlayStation 4 any longer. Which means that the games that you were playing, if you had a PlayStation 4, that were online will no longer have that support, and you won't be able to play those games online anymore for the PlayStation 4 system itself. Now, I'm an Xbox guy, and of course, they have a bunch of Xbox games on Xbox X Series that you can play that are from the original Xbox. In fact, I've downloaded some of my favorite ones, Jade Empire, Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. And that was from the original Xbox. Right now, X Series is probably, let me think, original 361. This is the 4th version of Xbox. And PlayStation is at its 5th version, and they're finally shutting down any ability to be able to use the PlayStation 4 for the support for the games. Now, I said, this is where the story comes in. For me personally, I haven't played a PlayStation game in a long time. Like I said, I've gone totally Xbox. I can't imagine that the fact that Xbox is able to, that you're able to download games from previous systems and still play them on your Xbox X Series. So I can imagine that that's probably what PlayStation is thinking, that they have the ability to move those games to your PlayStation 5, and you can still play them, but of course you have to then buy a PlayStation 5 in order to have that support. Now, this is where the story comes in. After reading that, it made me think about how much I really hate PlayStation. I am absolutely opposed to PlayStation. I am not a PlayStation guy. I will never again, ever give them a penny of my money. All of it goes to Xbox. Probably literally all of it. But truthfully, no more PlayStation. And here's my story of why I personally hate PlayStation. Now, originally, my cousins had a PlayStation when it first came out, and I played it and I thought it was kind of neat. And when I finally got the money together, I bought the original PlayStation for myself. And upon doing so, I was excited because I knew there's a bunch of games that I wanted to get into that were on PlayStation, and I was real happy about it. And I go and I bring my money to, well, like a lot of my stories end up, I bought it to Walmart, paid for a nice brand new PlayStation, and I took it home super excited. I was off from work that day. I was going to hook that sucker up and just play until I fell asleep. Except when I plugged it in. The system was cloudy, if I could make it a long story short. Plugged it in correctly, turned on everything, and the video was cloudy. Like you could hear it trying to work, but there was no visual that was clear. It was just cloudy, like black and white, snow all over the screen. I turned it off. I unplugged everything. I even turned off the TV, and of course, it didn't make any difference back then because we're talking stupid TVs, not smart TVs. And then I re-plugged everything back in, turned it all back on, and boom, same thing. Fortunately, like I said, I was off from work that day. So at that point, I grabbed my receipt because you never get rid of a receipt for a video game system within, I don't think you ever get rid of it. And I packed it all up, I put it back in the box, I jumped back in my car, I drove right back to Walmart, knowing their policy of they won't give you your money back. I didn't want my money back. I wanted one that worked. Only thing I could guess was maybe they dropped it in the back or it fell off the truck and had some weird thing happen to it. But I was okay with it. And I said, hey, I don't want my money back. I just want to exchange this. Here's the receipt. I literally bought the thing an hour ago. Just give me a different one. Person took it, like, oh, sorry about that. Hope this one works out better for you. And then they said that, and I didn't really pay any attention to it, but like, hopefully this one works out better for you. That might have been an indication that maybe I should just kind of like not be happy about this, but that's okay. I then took it, went home, unboxed it, made sure that everything inside that box was sealed up, just like the original one I got was. It didn't work, and everything was sealed up. I opened up, unplugged, I plugged everything in. Ta-da! PlayStation worked just fine. So the very first PlayStation I ever bought didn't work. I had to replace it immediately. But of course, that wasn't enough for me to say, PlayStation's terrible. Nah, it was an isolated incident, right? Maybe simply, I believe it was a year and a half later, that PlayStation that I had just gotten, the new one after the second one was, I go to turn it on, and it just doesn't work. So that second PlayStation was dead. At this point in time, it had been way longer. Nobody was giving my money back. So I had to go and buy a third PlayStation. This one actually lasted a couple of years. And I was kind of happy. It literally lasted like 2 years. And then, wouldn't you know, 2 years into it, a third PlayStation dead. I know what you're going to ask. What did I do? Did I plug it in directly to the wall? Did power spikes hit it? No. It was in a surge protector. The PlayStation itself was just junk. But of course, I didn't learn my lesson. And I bought a fourth one. Now, upon buying this fourth one, everything was good because at this point, it was maybe another year and a half or so, and PlayStation 2 was coming out. And at that point in time, PlayStation 2 had a situation where it had a disk drive that you could use, and with that disk drive, you could actually play DVDs. Ooh, that's when DVDs were starting to become the real big thing. And PlayStation had a driver that you could get, and it was literally a DVD, I guess, that you put inside the PlayStation 2, and it uploaded the ability to play movies. So I'm like, okay, I have to get this. So I got a PlayStation 2, I got the driver, and I started playing PlayStation 2 games. It was probably, did it last 2 years? At the same time, I actually had a Nintendo, what was it, 64? I think it might have been. Yeah, the Nintendo 64. Xbox was starting to make a showing because there was a game that I really wanted, which of course I mentioned earlier, Knights of the Old Republic. And I decided that, yeah, I think I want to get an Xbox too. Now, during this time period, some weird stuff started happening with the driver for the PlayStation 2. It stopped working. It was really sporadic. I would go and I'd play a movie and I maybe get like 20 minutes in, and all of a sudden it would just freeze. And then it would start up again, and then it would even turn off the whole system. And at this point, I tried to reboot the driver, and it turned out that it didn't work at all. So I could no longer play movies through the PlayStation 2. And then I started having issues playing games with the PlayStation 2. Now, the PlayStation 2 cost considerably more than the original PlayStation, because in fact, when I got my fourth and final original PlayStation that I traded for PlayStation 2, I found it, my cousin found it for me online. It was only $100. And so I wasn't so upset. But this PlayStation 2 that I had invested quite a bit into just literally was on the fritz just in time, like I said, for me to decide that Xbox I was going to give that a shot. So I immediately took the PlayStation 2, traded it in, put a little money down, got myself an Xbox, and I never looked back. Never looked back. Yes, I did have an issue that was a little upsetting with Xbox, but it was a timing thing. My Xbox, the original one, died just before Xbox 360 came out, and I had my my blown up ankle, and I traded that in to get an Xbox 360. But the Xbox 360s, I had a bunch of them, but for different reasons. I had two. Well, somebody pulled the plug on one of them. Yeah, pulled the plug out of the wall, and it just, while I was playing, and it just killed it. Another one had the Red Ring of Death, which was a slight issue, but after that, I then got, which I still have, two uh, Xbox 360s that I will never get rid of. And it would be a very difficult thing to pry those out of my cold hands because they're not just regular Xboxes, they are Xbox custom Xboxes. They are R2D2 Xbox 360s. They're just great. I love them. They still work to this day. I keep them around for two reasons. Reason number one, my X series fortunately does have a disk drive, but those those Xbox 360s have disk drives that you can use to play DVDs, and I still have a vast collection of DVDs. And push comes to shove, I'm the kind of person who definitely loves the hard copy because any of these streaming systems that you have could very easily decide that they don't want to show a certain movie ever again. And so you're now going to be at a loss. You're not going to be able to watch that movie unless you have a hard copy, which I do from every movie that I really want to watch. So I'm covered. But at the end of the day, I am an Xbox person. I never bought another PlayStation after PlayStation 2, and I wasn't going to be fooled or bamboozled into buying multiple PlayStation 2s. I bought one, it died, and I was done with it. So in total, I bought 5 Xbox products, but I didn't get PlayStation products. 4 original PlayStations and a PlayStation 2. I did not go 3, 4, or the current product 5, and I never ever will. So at the end of the day, I believe that PlayStation to me is junk, and I don't want it ever. Especially since the one game that was exclusive to PlayStation that I wanted to play is no longer really exclusive to PlayStation, and I've been able to play it for Xbox through the Game Pass, and I bought it. It was MLB The Show, the baseball game. So I have no need at all for PlayStation. Okay, the next story that I'm going to tell you is about another furry friend. I know last week's episode you met Phoenix, my daughter's cat, a good friend of mine. But I don't believe I've mentioned to you about the friend that I met when I moved into the house that we're in right now. Turns out that it's a little squirrel that I have named Jonathan. Met him in 2021. He wasn't around. I didn't really see him when we first got to the house because it was around this time, and I guess he was already storing up his nuts for the winter, and he was ready to go, and I really didn't see him very often. But in the spring of 2021, I started seeing him a lot, and so frequently to the point where after going to Five Guys, you know how they have those free peanuts? I would grab a whole bunch of those and I'd give him the free peanuts. As to where now, in the last several springs, I would go and pick up a 5-pound bag of peanuts from ShopRite or Walmart or somewhere like that, and occasionally give him a handful of peanuts throughout the spring and summer, because I don't want him to become dependent on the peanuts that I give him, but I want to have him there so he has a few extra, so it's kind of neat. Of course, during this time, Jonathan had what I believe was his wife, and my daughter named her Martha. And it was the two of them. And they were running up and down throughout the trees in both our neighborhood and in the trees around my house. And it turned out that it almost looked that they were renting out space to the birds, because the birds weren't always there, but Jonathan and Martha were always there. So it seemed as if that they were renting out space in the trees for the birds. And the birds would come and they would put their nests up there, and it seemed like they would then take off after a while. But who was still there? Jonathan, building and moving around and doing all the things he does. Now, we're going to fast forward just a little bit. Me and Jonathan have become good friends, and it was probably 2023. I look out the window and I see Jonathan sitting on the tree, and then I see 3 other little squirrels. Jonathan had some kids. And there were 3 little squirrels running up and down the trees, running real fast, and they were playing. And I was like, wow, okay, so Jonathan has children now. And the children were running up and down the trees, kind of wild and crazy, being kids. And Jonathan was sort of watching his children do what they do, as he was doing the work, collecting nuts, getting ready for the winter, as always. And so I'm thinking, this is pretty cool. Jonathan's got himself a family now. And like I said, originally, I wouldn't, at first you would think that, oh, they're just more squirrels going to the tree. No. These were definitely children, because they were much, much smaller squirrels. So Jonathan had his kids. Then, of course, it turned out during this time period between 2022 and 2023, one of the 3 little squirrels was gone. And I was like, oh, this isn't good. Something happened to one of his kids. But the other 2 were still playing, and they're still doing their thing, and they're still outside even as we speak, doing work, checking out the trees, renting out the space to the birds. And sadly, my daughter found the skull of a squirrel. And we were thinking that maybe something had eaten one of Jonathan's children. And I was like, oh, that's sad. It's really sad. One of his kids got eaten. Can't imagine what could have done it or why it did it. But then the answer came into absolute clear focus. Ready for this? I was looking around outside one day and I saw a giant hawk. Just enormous. The hawk was just huge. And I went, okay. Big white brown hawk. This is probably what ate Jonathan's kid. And then I saw a few days later something that I should have taken a picture of, but I didn't. And I'm so mad that I didn't, because I've never seen one of these up close. And it was just incredible. I wish I took a picture of it. Now, you see, out here there's all kinds of birds. Every year since we moved here, I've seen lots of robins floating around. And then there would be a cardinal that would stop by, and a blue jay that would also stop by. Plenty of crows too, but we're going to get back to that. But I had never, in the 5 years living here, seen this bird. And like I said, I've never seen this bird ever. Even living in Barnegat, in the dark spots in the woods, I never ran across one until earlier in the year. It was an owl. It was a white owl. And I was like, oh my goodness. That is yet another predatory bird that is going to be a problem for Jonathan and his family. In fact, this one is going to be just as bad. They're not going to get any rest, because this giant hawk is going to be trying to stalk them all day long. And then this owl is going to go try to get them at night. So they're in some real trouble here. Until I started realizing that all these crows are around. And it's not just a few crows. It's not even just a murder. For the record, for those of you who don't know, a murder is like a flock of crows. There were like 4 flocks of crows. So there's like 4 murders all around my neighborhood. And several of them apparently have been renting space in the trees in my house from Jonathan. So they know Jonathan and have seemed to be friends with Jonathan. And because of this, I believe the problem of the hawk and the owl became solved. Now, this is a very interesting thing that I discovered after seeing that giant owl and that giant hawk. What ended up happening was they were gone. Maybe a week later. No hawk, no owl. And I was like, why? That doesn't make any sense. I still see Jonathan and his kids running around. So they didn't eat them and leave. So what happened? Why did the hawk go away? Why did the owl go away? Now, granted, there are plenty of other trees. Now, yeah, I do live in Philadelphia, but this area here, there is a lot of woods. So the hawk and the owl must have gone to go, as they would say, greener pastures somewhere down the road in the neighborhood. Although the easy meal was right here with Jonathan, I'm glad they didn't eat him or his kids. And I was super confused as to why this was. Where did they go? And why was it so abrupt? Like they're here for a minute, they realized that this is a place that they should not be, and then they were gone. What happened? The answer is the crows. It was interesting. Check this out. I discovered that owls and crows are really big time enemies. Didn't know it. Had to figure it out. Turned out that I noticed this. Of course, they say don't pay any attention to anything you see on social media, but this one's true. Turns out that owls have a real bad habit of liking to go at night and attacking crows' eggs. If there's eggs around, owls will destroy the crow eggs. But at the same time, crows will go during the day and destroy owl eggs. How about that? Now, considering that this area where I live has been flooded with crows, and that was the very first owl that I had ever seen in the area, it was probably likely that there was just that one owl versus, like I said, all these murders of crows. So what I can imagine is that the murder of crows found the owl's nest and destroyed it. Got rid of the eggs. The owl was both heartbroken because its kids were dead, and knew that no matter what it could try at night, it would never be able to get rid of that many crow eggs because there were so many. And granted, some of these crows, I think they play in Baltimore, because another thing that I've learned throughout my time is that if a crow becomes a certain size, meaning it gets big, it's no longer considered a crow, really. It becomes a raven. And I'll have to admit that there are probably, I'd say 10 or 12 that I've seen that were oversized crows, to the point where I'm going to say that they would probably be classified as ravens. And I'm thinking those guys were bigger than the owl. And I don't think that the one owl would want to deal with 10 or 12 ravens. So it's safe to say that they essentially removed the owl threat. And on the same token, that giant hawk was just singular, just one that I saw. And that several murders of crows, and like I said, those 10, 12 ravens probably took offense to the fact that that hawk was in the area as well. And they probably marked their territory and got rid of the hawk too. So I believe that the crows eliminated the hawk and the owl from the equation, and Jonathan and his family are safe as can be. Now, I have a theory about why that happened. Because, like I said, I believe that Jonathan has been renting tree space to birds in the area, and sort of like an Airbnb to the cardinal, the blue jay, and the robins, because they're not here all the time. So they stop in and they're able to just sit there for a little while. And I think that they probably pay Jonathan in nuts, because I think that's what he accepts. He doesn't take MasterCard or Visa, but he takes nuts of all kind, peanuts, acorns, nuts. It's kind of the currency he works with. And I believe that those birds pay him to stay. And at that same note, I believe that since there are so many crows / ravens who have been in my trees, or should I say in Jonathan's trees, I think that there was some sort of deal struck between Jonathan and the crows, because the crows hate the owl. The owl wants to eat Jonathan and his children. So I think that there must have been some sort of arrangement that Jonathan made with the crows to eliminate the owl and the hawk threat. And I believe that that deal was struck, and their friendship and bond between Jonathan and the crows was strong, because I still see lots of crows hanging out on my trees, and Jonathan running around with his children, living life, enjoying the nuts that I give them and the nuts that they find, with no threat from either the owl or the hawk. So I think that there is some sort of mutual exchange that's going on there. And I'm really glad that Jonathan was able to coordinate with those crows in order to make sure that he and his family have safety and security from those predatory birds. That is my Jonathan story. Jonathan the squirrel, good friend of mine. Now, to try not to turn into the Red Hulk, I'm going to still tell you this story anyway. No promises here. No promises. On more than one occasion, I have brought it to the attention of anyone who will listen on my show that I was a mechanic, and technically means I am a mechanic. However, I haven't touched a car for profit since 2016, so it's almost been 10 years. And I also was an assistant manager at Mavis, or technically the shop manager. My responsibilities were to run the actual shop, not the entire store, but the shop. I moved from the front desk, taking people's information and then writing up tickets in order to get the work done and giving them prices and estimates, to specifically being the person who wrote up the estimates in the shop. And it helped because of working on the vehicles. There's two things that I would do for the company and the mechanics that were working with me. For one, I would give an accurate price as far as to what the customer should be paying based on all the information that I have at hand, based on my firsthand knowledge of working on the vehicle at that state of disrepair, and knowing what is the rate that we should charge based on the company standards. Knowing all those things, I would calculate a good price. and it would be both the price that is acceptable for us to be able to make a profit and still keep the cost as low as I can for the customer on occasion. There were times when customers did things to their own vehicle that now made it more difficult for us to do our job, and at those times I would either tell the customer that we don't want to work on your car because of the damage that they did. I don't want any part of it to be responsible for whatever they may complain that happens after we get done working on it, and two, because the damage would be so severe that it's going to cost them more money than they would have had to pay had they come to our shop earlier. Now to the story. Turns out that because of my knowledge of vehicles and the fact that, like I said, 2016 was the last time that I personally worked on a vehicle, it's always easier for me to take a vehicle to a shop to get fixed, especially when it's something that exceeds 2016, something that I have no firsthand knowledge of working on. And the fact that my wife has this Kia Telluride that has the lane departure system, I have never actually worked on that. And of course, as a mechanic, and more importantly, one who had the ASE certification for steering and suspension, meaning that I was an expert on steering and suspension. And that's the stuff that, like the power steering pump, the rack and pinion, the steering unit, the tie rods, the shocks, the struts, the tires, aligning a vehicle. That's the stuff that I was essentially an expert at. Now, having said that, with the lane departure system, I'm trying not to get too technical, but in order for this to really make more sense, I need to go here. I'm not sure completely how the lane departure system reacts to those hard parts like the tie rod and the rack. Even the power steering, and of course the brakes, because lane departure systems, of course, they beep every single time because of the sensors that are in there when you get too close to a vehicle on either side. And if you get too close to a vehicle in front of you or behind you when you're backing up, the vehicle will brake itself, meaning that the computer sends a message to the brakes and the brakes stop, which tells me that there is possibly some manner of sensor that I have never worked on that connects to the power steering and the brakes in order to stop the vehicle or control the vehicle from the weaving and such. That's actually nothing that I've ever worked on. So for my money, it seems like it makes more sense, since I've been out of the game for a while, to take the vehicle to a shop to get it worked on. And again, like I said, this is a 2020 Telluride that my wife has. It's so much simpler to take it to the people who know the vehicle better than anybody else. So I take it to the Kia dealership. The thing needs a lot of work at this point in time. It needed a hub bearing. It needed a oil pan gasket. And then the thing that the story is really about, it needed brakes. Now, I knew about the brakes. But again, like I said, because of the systems involved, and of course, because of my back, and I'm not getting down there doing that stuff anymore. Not without a lift, especially. So I let them do it. Now, I had very specific instructions because I knew that they were going to go ahead and that they were going to do their inspection, which makes sense. If I don't physically have the tires off the car, I can't tell you exactly what is going on. But I do know what things feel like. And when somebody tells me what they think, I can then listen to what they're saying, use my expertise, and decide whether or not what they're saying makes sense. When it comes to the brakes, I have a very specific philosophy, and it's real simple. But before I get to my philosophy, I'm going to tell you what you can do with brakes. There are really 3 things that you can do with brakes. And this is your standard disc brakes, or even if you have drum brakes, which are getting less, and they're usually in the back. You can replace the brake pads only if the rotors are in good enough shape and the pads are just worn down. That's a possibility. It can be done easily enough and safely as long as the rotors are in good shape. You can replace the rotors and the pads. Rotors are no good, you get rid of them and you put new rotors on, and the pads obviously are not going to be any good if the rotors are bad. Don't let anybody fool you and say, oh, the pads still have some meat on them, but the rotors are not good. We're going to just go ahead and replace the rotors and we'll just use those same pads. No, because the pads are a softer material than the rotor, and anything that's on the rotor, say those grooves and such, that's going to easily wear into the pads, which means the pads are no good. So if you need to get rid of the rotors, you're going to need to get rid of the pads too, even if they were only on there for a week. You got to get rid of them. Then there is another option, which is becoming less and less relevant this day and age, and that is you can cut the rotors. But even when you cut the rotors, you're still going to need to replace the pads because, like I said, the pads will wear into whatever is in the rotors. So the rotors being cut means that there are some disformities in them and they need to be trimmed down or resurfaced in order to use. And if you're resurfacing them, that means the surface was bad, which means that is creating a problem with the pads, and the pads have got to go. Now, when it comes to cutting or resurfacing pads, I know I'm getting a little technical. Just bear with me. It's all a part of the story. I need to tell this in order for it to make sense. In order to resurface the rotors, they have to be within a measurement that allows you to resurface them. In other words, they have to be thick enough so that you can cut them down and they'll still be safe. Of course, that requires a micrometer to get an accurate measurement, and then you need to look up the data in order to make sure that the thickness that you found with your micrometer is thick enough to actually cut the rotors. And then when you get it right, you still have to make sure you cut them within that area so that they don't get too thin. Now, my personal philosophy is one that is going to be, I'm going to get into that. And it's real simple to me. If there's a deformity in the rotor and the pads are obviously going to go, it's not going to be as much labor to just throw away the rotors and just replace them. It's going to simply be easier for both the mechanic and for the customer, because it's going to be faster. Pop off those rotors, throw them out, put on new rotors. You know those rotors are at spec. No issues. They're good. They're brand new rotors. No questions asked. No problems. You don't have to ask. You don't have to think. When you cut rotors, like I said, you have to check to make sure they're within spec, that you can cut them. Second of all, you need to make sure that you cut them within spec, because even if you resurface them, you still need to remeasure them with the micrometer to make sure that you didn't cut too much. Because if you cut too much of the rotor, you can't use them. Because now they're too small, they're out of spec, and they're no good. So you need to make sure that they're thick enough after you cut them, as well as before you cut them. All that being said, when I took it to the Kia dealership and they told me all the things that they needed, like I said, the oil pan and gasket, the hub bearing, and it needed a brake job, and they suggested that they can cut the rotors. Now, I know that cutting the rotors is like I said, it's not as easy to do as it is to just replace the rotors. Just be done with it. Because, like I said, it takes time to measure the rotors the first time to make sure that A, there's enough material, B, that they're not out of round. Because if they're not round anymore and you cut them, they're going to make a horrible wobbling, and it's not going to make you feel good, and it's not going to break right. 2, you need to make sure there's no hot spots in the rotor, meaning little spots that because of the heat and the friction when you stop the car with the brakes, sometimes it actually creates hot spots which become harder than the rotor already was. It makes those spots really hard, and if you're trying to cut the rotor, those spots are not going to cut right because they're harder than the other material is that was supposed to be. And when they get hot spots in them, you got to get rid of the rotors. So ultimately, there are so many more reasons why not to cut them than there is to cut them. People are like, oh, you're saving money on the actual rotor itself. Let's face it. If you're buying rotors for anywhere between $60 and $100 a piece, is that worth the price of being able to stop your vehicle versus not paying the $60 or $80, $60 to $100 a piece for a rotor? Is it worth giving them more money in labor, which is going to cost more time and labor than it would if you have to just replace the rotors? Because think of it like this: the labor that you're going to pay to replace the rotors, you still have to pay that labor to cut them, because you still have to take apart the brakes, pull the rotor off, put it on the brake lathe, and then they get more labor for actually doing the resurfacing. So at the end of the day, you may not be paying for labor, you may not be paying for the parts of the rotor, but you're probably going to end up paying for the new rotors anyway, based on the labor that it's going to charge you for cutting the rotors and taking them off of their position and then putting them back together again. It's probably going to cost about the same. And you don't have a lot of those if, ands, or buts question marks. Like I said, are they thick enough to cut? Are they thick enough after they cut? Are there hot spots? Are they out of round? So then we're going to have wobbling issues. You don't have any of that if you just take them off, throw them away, put new ones on. Problem is solved. Life is better. And so, now that I've gotten my Red Hulk phase starting to boil over, I'm going to tell you that they told me that they could cut the rotors again. And I told them, absolutely not. Replace them. Replace them. Because they wanted to cut the rotors. I just said replace them. Do not cut them. For all the reasons that I already mentioned. Don't cut them. And now the reason that I didn't mention, I didn't want them to cut the rotors on that. For one, there are literally in this world 8 people that I would trust to cut rotors. Especially on my vehicle. Only 8. Just 8. And these are 8 people that I know. 8. And among those 8 that I would trust to cut the rotors on my vehicle, Two of them live in New Jersey. One of them has, I believe, gone back to his home country of Sierra Leone. Another one has retired and lives in Kentucky. Two more have passed away. And then the eighth person is myself. And I'm not about to cut them. I always replace them. I know how to cut them, but I'd rather not do all the extra work. I just get rid of them, be done with it. So between those 8 individuals, 2 of them no longer with us, 1 retired, 1 in Africa, and the other 2 in New Jersey, there's legitimately nobody who I trust to cut rotors on any vehicle that I own. Not one person. Not right now. Well, there is one guy. One guy. He's here in Philadelphia. I forgot about him. I don't know why I forgot about him, because he definitely earned my respect. I love that guy. I would absolutely let him cut the rotors, because he had his ASE and brakes, and I could certainly use him. I would use him. So it's 9. I forgot about that. It's 9. And the other, like I said, the 2 retired guys, one in Kentucky, one in South Carolina. Do my math again. 1 in Africa, 2 guys in New Jersey, and 2 guys were dead, and then myself. So it's 9, actually. 9. But still, that's less than the amount of people. I can count them, essentially, with both of my hands. How many people I would trust. Don't need my toes. And so they said, okay, at the Kia dealership, we will not cut your rotors. Good. Go, I have the work done. I come get the vehicle. They tell me it's done. And the first thing I do is I look at the rotors. And you know what I see on the rotors that they were supposed to replace? Rust. Why is there rust on the rotors? Because they didn't replace them. They cut them like I told them not to do. It's at this point where I begin to turn into the Red Hulk, and the fire is beginning to burn underneath me and all around me because of that pulsating anger making me hotter and hotter. I go in and I tell them, hey, no, you cut these things. I told you not to cut them. Why? And at that point, I decided that I'm not going to take this Kia A to that Kia dealership for any reason. And it really makes me mad because it's real close to my house. But I'm never taking it back there because, like I said, my expert opinion is to just get rid of them. And yet they told me that they'll cut them, and I told them not to do it. Now, it's one thing for a customer to not understand what they're asking you to do and then do it. And it's a completely different thing when the customer has physically worked on the parts that he's speaking about. And I understand how it works. And I know the difference between the two. And I know that I would rather not do cutting a rotor because, again, like I said, I only trust 9 people to do it. And 2 of them are dead. And there's so many variables that go along with doing it. And of the people who I've seen cut the rotors, only those 9 people that I mentioned, myself included, have cut a rotor and then used a micrometer to double check to make sure that they didn't cut too much. So I don't know if this person did that. I have no idea. And it makes me angry to no end. But to say the least, you got to get the vehicle inspected. Am I taking that Telluride to that Kia dealership to get the inspection? Absolutely not. Pep Boys, here we come. And that's the end of me going to that dealership because I told them not to cut the rotors, and yet they did. So, on that note, I'm going to close out the show, and we're going to ring the bell for the main event. Now, here's the funny part. I got myself all fired up, and I'm going to go to the Spear of the Week right now, and the Spear of the Week goes to the service writer at that Kia dealership who did not listen to what I told him to do, and they cut the rotors of the car, the brake rotors, when I told them not to. And as a direct result, they're getting a Spear as a company because I'm not taking it back to their shop for any reason at all. If there is some sort of recall issue, or if there's something specific that I want Kia to work on, there's more than one Kia dealership. And guess what? Kia is made by Hyundai. If I really want to, I'll take it to a Hyundai dealership. Doesn't matter. Same parts. Same stuff. I am not going back to that Kia dealership for anything. Nope. Thank you. Bye. Spear of the Week. Service writer at the local Kia dealership. Now, I'm overly excited about this next segment because it's one of my favorite ones, and I have a lot to talk about, and I'm going to do it really quickly. Because as of last week, my week 4 picks made my record 10-10. I was right at 500, and I can truthfully say it was one of my worst performances ever. Typically, when I'm a loser, I usually go 2-3. I don't usually go 1-4. In fact, I don't remember going worse than 2-3 in my bad picks. And oh no, I did. I'm looking back. Looks like week 7 of last year I went 1-4. Was it week 7 or week 5? It's illegible, but it's definitely last year, and I definitely went 1-4, much like I did last week, 1-4, just absolutely abysmal. But I have my week 5 picks and the results, and then I'm going to go into up into week 7 because I have my picks for that. But here we go. I said the 49ers were going to beat the Rams 27-20, and I was close. It ended up actually being 26-23. 49ers won. Giants versus the Saints. I went with the Saints over the Giants in these two really stinky teams. I said 2017. Score ended up being 26 Saints, 17 Giants. Another win. Texans versus Ravens. People would think, oh, the Ravens. They're still the Ravens, right? No, they're really not. I said Texans were going to win 20-10. And boy, I wasn't even close. I said 2017, excuse me. And I wasn't even close. Originally, I said the Ravens were going to win, but I changed my pick to Texans 20-17. And again, like I said, I wasn't even remotely close. It ended up being 44-10. Texans destroyed the Ravens. Lions versus the Bengals without Joe Burrow. I said that it was going to be 35-17. Well, Bengals had a little bit of extra life. They got 24, but the Lions, they got 37. Again, a win, 37-17. 24 Lions. Um, this is the toughest one that I had in my mind. The Commanders versus the Chargers. And I said Chargers were going to lose this one. I said Commanders are going to win relatively close, 20 to 27. And I was slightly wrong because I did get the score of, it ended up being 27 to 10. It wasn't as close as I thought it was going to be. But the Commanders, in fact, won. And that meant that I, for the first time ever, actually went 5-0. All my picks were correct. And which makes it even more fun, the fact that all my picks were correct, and I picked them 2 weeks in advance. Ha! My crystal ball was out of the shop, and it was working perfectly. I got all 5 picks, all 5 right. My record for the season is 15-5 because did not lose a single game in week 5 based on my picks. Feel real good about that one. I'm going to reiterate what I had picked for week 6. I have the 49ers over the Bucks, 20-17. The Rams are going to come back from their loss to the 49ers, and because they get what's good for you. I mean, they're playing the Ravens in week 6, so I'm pretty sure they're going to beat them. That's going to be 30-21. Colts are going to beat the Cardinals 24-20. I think that's going to be a little bit closer. The Steelers are going to beat the Browns because that's just what they do. 20-10. Packers will beat the Bengals. No Joe Burrow. Packers 35, Bengals 10. And I'm upset about that because originally I was going to pick the Bengals to win a bunch of games, but Joe's hurt, so it's not going to work the way I thought it was. And for week 7, I have the Steelers beating the Bengals, which is one that I wasn't going to originally have. But I picked the Steelers to win 30-21 in week 7. Eagles were going to beat the Vikings 23-17, I believe, somewhere in that neighborhood. The Bears and the Saints. The Bears are way better. The Saints may be the worst team in the league. I think that's going to be 28-10 for the Bears. The Cowboys versus the Commanders. Well, I love the Commanders, and the Cowboys are just not quite right. But I think it's a division game, so anything can happen in those. I'm going to say that that's going to end up being 35-30 Commanders. Falcons versus the 49ers. Well, I like the 49ers, obviously. And I believe that they're going to win that game 28-24 because the Falcons, they have a pretty good group of young players, and they could make it very, very interesting. Can't wait for that one. But those are my picks for week 7 and week 6. Now it's time to really get ready to close the door on the show. And the way I'm going to do that is by telling you here and now. You can always check me out on Instagram at Philip Henderson 5102. You can also join us. Become a part of the LIP Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. I'm extremely excited about the channel and the subscriptions. I don't have a ton of them, but I am pleased to say that last couple of weeks I got a few more. Come on, join us at PhilTheLip. Check out all my content. You can also go to my archives, which are on Spotify. Check that out. Get yourself acquainted with what the show was like before I went to YouTube. Some pretty good stuff that's on there. If I could give you a few that I would recommend from the archives, just off the top of my head, I would recommend 100% The Entrepreneur. One of my favorite episodes. Patrick Houston and I have a nice conversation, and he's super insightful. Can't wait to do another show with him. Gotta do it. But without a doubt, The Entrepreneur is a great show to check out from the archives. As well as I would suggest going to check out any of the other story episodes, because I think that those ones are pretty entertaining. I like the story episodes. Not that I don't like any other ones, but the story episodes, there's something that you would like if you wanted to try to get a good feel for a lot of what I like to do, check those story episodes out because you'll see things that I've done and experienced. Another set of shows that I would recommend just off the top of my head. Um, Anything that is, what are we doing? What are we doing episodes are always fun too. Have a look at those if you're interested in checking out the archives of The Lip on Spotify. And now it's time for the words of wisdom. And as advertised, I actually am part of several Facebook groups, and one of the Facebook groups that I'm a part of is a 49er fan page. Go figure. Turns out that there was a kicker who the 49ers had for a couple of years who just kept missing field goals and losing games. Whereas this year, after they got rid of him, they cut him after like week 2 for missing more field goals. Finally, just got tired of it. They got a new kicker who has been very accurate and has actually helped the 49ers win close games as opposed to lose them. And I posted on this 49er fan site a picture of Jake Moody, the kicker who was so terrible, and said after the victory that they had over the Rams, if he was the kicker, we would have lost. And I have no doubt in my mind that that's exactly what happened, because his inaccuracy and his lack of ability for big game situations is what cost the 49ers the Super Bowl, most recently against the Chiefs. Dude hit a 55-yard field goal, but he missed a very much shorter one, and it cost them to go into overtime, and just the whole mess was just disgusting. He was a problem. There was a guy who was on there who commented saying, well, what's going on? Why are you doing all this stuff? Da, da, da. And I went back and forth with him for a little bit, and he actually had a comment which was really funny, and he said that, oh, you're a little comedian. Little? I'm not little at A. I'm not really a comedian. And I made sure to let him know that. I was going to do a video and go over the whole thread, but he really isn't worth my time. So I did want to acknowledge him because I said I would. And the best place to do so is here on Words of Wisdom. I'm going to say that this guy needs to heed to these words of wisdom that my daughter actually told me about several months ago. And I think they fit perfectly for this gentleman. And those words of wisdom are as follows. My criticism is rated E for everyone. My criticism is rated E for everyone. Thank you for that one, Miss Aurora. And on that note, I'm going to just have to go ahead and tell everybody that my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip.